typically time is your best friend when it comes to Roth IRA, or not typically, all the time. Having that money sitting there as long as possible to let it compound is the most ideal, right?
Any retirement account, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah, any retirement account. Yeah. Welcome back to Generational Sense, where we make sense of generational finance and wealth. Today we're going to be discussing Roth IRAs. So if you haven't been here, my name is Nate, and this is my dad, Brian.
Hey, Brian.
And hey. And today we're going to be diving into, like I said, Roth IRAs. It's an exciting topic, retirement. How can we be saving and investing for that? And Roth IRAs is a great choice for that. So we're going to be diving in deep and teach you all a little bit about that today. So Dad, if you want to start us off with what is a Roth IRA at its core and how does it stand out as a really good retirement savings tool?
Okay, sounds good. I think today what we're going to be looking at is what is this Roth versus a traditional IRA, and which one should you choose? We'll try to keep it simple and give you some tips, Nate, for what I think you ought to do on that. So the Roth IRA, it is an individual retirement account. And the reason these are called individual retirement accounts is because the IRS has set them up so that individuals can work on setting themselves up for retirement in a tax-advantaged way, especially if they do not have a retirement plan at work, like a pension or a 401k. And so that's why they're called individual retirement accounts. And the Roth is a version that came along in the 90s that allows you to contribute what's called pre-tax, and we'll get into that some more as we compare the traditional to got that backwards. The Roth allows you to contribute after tax, whereas the traditional was pre-tax. And so that's going to be your key difference, but that makes a difference in many other ways that I'm sure we're going to discuss. But at the end of the day, the Roth IRA is an individual retirement account, and it helps you grow some money for retirement and get some tax benefits.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know you were kind of urging to get into that right there of how exactly does a Roth IRA differ from a traditional, especially when it comes to taxes.
Okay, and that question is going to be the bulk of what we will talk about with your question today. So traditional IRA, that's when I got out of college and had my first job, that's all I had available to me was the traditional IRA. The Roth did not yet exist, which is unfortunate because when you're really young, you definitely want to take advantage of the Roth. The Roth is ideal if you have lower income, if you are trying to save over a very long period of time. So why is that? So I mentioned a while ago tax treatment. The traditional IRA, when you put money in, what the government did when they passed the traditional IRA laws was they wanted people to contribute. And so they made it where those contributions were pre-tax, meaning you contribute and you don't get taxed on that income. So it reduces your taxable income right here, right now, so that you do not have to pay taxes on it. So that's nice. So if you're making 50 grand and you put 5 grand into your traditional IRA, Nate, then you're only going to pay taxes on 45 grand. So now you've just, whatever tax rate you're at times that extra $5,000, you've saved that much money. And in fact, you could say, well, that's part of the money. By saving that money, I have more to invest and put in my traditional IRA. And so if you think of it that way, then you're actually making that money march for you and to create wealth for you over the long haul. So that's the traditional IRA. You want to talk about the Roth?
Yeah. Go ahead and give a couple of differences on how the Roth differs there.
Let's look at the Roth and its tax treatment. So, on first blush, you're like, well, why would I want to do that? Because the Roth contributions are after tax, meaning you do not get an upfront tax break.
Right.
So it's like, well, why would I want to do that? Well, you put the money into the Roth account, and let's say you put let's say you do $6,000 a year. That's $500 a month, and you do that for 30 years. Okay, let's do you have a calculator in front of you, Nate?
I can get one.
Let me do 6,000 times 12 times 30 years. No, not 12 times 12. Let's just do 6,000 times 30. All right, so that's $180,000, right, over a 30-year time period. But the stock market historically has returned about 10%. So the cool thing about the Roth is that $180,000 that you've put in, if the stock market does what it has historically done and returns, let's just say let's say a more conservative 9%, then in 30 years that $180,000 is going to be worth $1 million. So what the Roth does for you is allows you to take out that $1 million with no taxes. So while you paid your taxes on $180,000, now you get another $820,000 that you'll never pay taxes on. So you have set yourself up for a situation where you have a nice big pot of money that's tax-free. And the cool thing about it is usually, anytime you reinvest capital gains or you get dividend income on a stock or an ETF or a mutual fund, every year you have to pay the taxes on that growth that has been vested in your account. Whereas with the Roth, it will always grow tax-free from day one. So that $1 million has grown to that $1 million much faster because you got to keep all of the gains along the way. So if you'd not gotten to keep all of the gains along the way and you'd have to pay taxes on that, you'd have somewhat less than that $1 million, depending on what strategies you chose for tax management and keeping your money tax advantaged. But the bottom line is you would have some impact on that overall growth, because if you had it in a non-retirement, tax-advantaged retirement account. Now, the traditional IRA, it's going to get the same advantage. It grows tax-free. However, that $1 million, if you were to grow it tax-free, you put in the $180,000 over 10 years, it grows to $1 million. Now, with the traditional IRA, here's another key difference. This is the key difference, right, you might say, is that as you pull it out, you're going to pay taxes on it as income. So whatever income tax bracket you wind up in, you're going to pay taxes on that $1 million. So if you're in the lowest bracket, what's that, I think 12%, then $120,000 of that $1 million, you're going to have to pay out as taxes. If you're in a higher bracket, good news is you've got lots of money and you're making lots of money if you're in like the 35% bracket. But of that $1 million, $350,000 of it you're going to give to the government as you take it out. So the big differences there are, is it pre-tax or after tax? The traditional is pre-tax, meaning it reduces your taxable income right now. The Roth is after tax, meaning you're going ahead and you're paying the taxes on your income. But they let you put it in there with you knowing that you'll never have to pay taxes on that money again, even the growth of it. So that's the incentive to want to do it. So, which one do you think I prefer?
I prefer the one that compounds and that you don't have to pay taxes on later on. Because you're right. I mean, that's a big part of it too. Is it not only depends right now, especially when it comes to taxes, but how much are you going to be making down the line when you don't really know, so you can't really bet on that. But also, that's huge if you are in a larger tax bracket at that point, which I feel like most people are at that time in their lives. And, you have this hope for this large pot of money, and then it kind of just disappears with taxes. So it's a great point.
If you listen to this show and you follow a lot of the advice that we give to make generational sense out of your money, then you're going to have a situation 30, 40 years from now where you are making a lot more money, whether it be from interest and dividends on the millions that you've accumulated, or from your continued growth as a bit entrepreneur or an employee, where you've just ramped up what you're able to earn in a living. So like you said, you're going to end up in that higher tax bracket. So the Roth will be something you're extremely happy that you have at the time. Now as you do become a little bit higher income earner, it does make some more sense to contribute to this traditional IRA. And you might want to ask, well, why is that? Well, let's say you are in a 28% tax bracket and you're able to still contribute to a traditional IRA. Well, that money you're putting in immediately gets that tax break, right? At a decent, at a pretty good clip. So if you think about it from the standpoint where I'm investing that much more because of that tax break, then in a sense you're investing more, and you could argue that that's going to grow. And so there's some complex formulas that you can use to kind of tell which one in the long run works out better for you. So what I would advise is, try to shoot for having both baskets, because they both have their advantages and some disadvantages. And so a lot of financial advisors will say, well, if you're maxing out the one, try to do some of the other as well. But my strong preference, because and the main reason for this is that the future is unknown, is for the Roth, because we don't know what tax rates will be, Nate, 30 years from now. Our federal government has a huge, and $1.8 trillion last year in deficit spending. At some point, the government's going to have to raise money, right? Or this new administration, they're out there cutting, but there's only so much that you can cut before you start to really impact the economy and the people and what they're willing to absorb. And so there's probably going to have to be a more measured approach where there's an increase in taxes as well as a cut in spending, as well as some adjustments to things like the age that we take Social Security. And so all of these things will come into play. Well, if tax rates go up, then that makes the Roth, that money that's in a Roth account, even more advantageous in the future.
It's more valuable.
Because it's going to come out tax-free, meaning that if rates are higher, you will not have to pay 30, 40, 50% of your money in taxes to the government at that point. So that's huge.
It's a great point.
We haven't talked about income limits. That may not be something you'd even think to ask about, but that
was my next question.
Okay, good. So the traditional IRA, because you're going ahead and paying your taxes, the government does not put a limit on how what your income can be to contribute to that. Whereas with the Roth IRA, they do. I'm not sure what their logic is behind that. I haven't dove into that. And I think that there's some potential, because there's more and more emphasis by Congress on getting people to save and invest for their own retirement. Especially as they think about moving the retirement age for collecting Social Security to a bit later start date. I think they want people to be prepared for that. And so I think there's some chance, this is total speculation, that at some point those contribution limits for the Roth might either be raised to a very, very high limit or done away with completely. And I'll just mention those limits right now. For 2025, $165,000 for single filers and $246,000 for married filing jointly. So if you're under those levels, you can contribute to a Roth account. If you are above those levels, then there's a taper off for about $10,000-$20,000, and then it goes away completely. And then,
interesting.
And then there's a complex two-step dance you can do called a backdoor Roth that may or may not be something worth considering if you find yourself in that condition. That would be something you'd probably want the help of a financial planner with.
Yeah.
So
how much So you said what limits you can have on income to be able to invest. How much can you invest in a Roth IRA annually, or a traditional IRA annually? Is there a difference there?
Well, how old are you, Nate? You don't have to answer that. So for those under 50, the
30.
maximum contribution right now is $7,000.
Okay.
So you would be you and all your young kindred would be $7,000 for oldies like me. The government wants us to try to catch up if we haven't done a very good job of saving and investing.
Okay.
Yeah. So they give us another $1,000. So we could do
Okay.
8,000 if you're 50 or older. And the same thing applies to things like, look at this, if you're an older audience member and you're listening to this, and be aware that when you're over 50, you can also contribute more to your 401k, your 403b, and these other types of plans. And that may be very helpful to you because unfortunately when we're young, this applied to me, you tend to not have as much discretionary income because you're not making as much, and you've got all these new expenses for getting life going, like cars and houses and education and paying off loans. And so you may not be able to max out those contributions. Mm-hmm. I strongly encourage you to find a way if at all possible, but that's why there's this catch-up provision later on.
Yeah. Interesting. So I know the answer to this, and I hate to even bring it up because I know this is going to spark some thoughts that may not be the best thoughts regarding the Roth IRA when it comes to how to use the account. But what makes the Roth IRA more flexible regarding withdrawals on the compared to other accounts, or maybe just as that account?
Yeah. Well, since you've already paid the taxes on the money that goes into the Roth, the government will let you take the principal back out. Mm-hmm. Okay, and the principal, is a fancy word for the money that you put into it. Right. And so, if you've gotten, say you've done 10 years worth at $7,000 a year, then you've put in $70,000. So let's say an emergency comes up, you're having a baby, or you're, you got injured, or you messed up your car and you got to have transportation, and you haven't built up an emergency fund like we talked about in a prior episode to help cover that so that you don't have to pull from your individual retirement account. Right. Then you can pull from the Roth without a penalty from the principal. Now, you will pay a penalty if you pull from the
gains.
Yeah. So you want to avoid that at all costs. And your mom and I, we actually had a situation where we had another baby, and still didn't have maternity insurance. We did not have maternity for any of our 6 kids because we didn't plan any of them. And that was back when, in order to have maternity coverage, you had to add it to your policy. So we kept thinking we were A, not yet starting to have children, or B,
done.
So yet again, I had to come up with $20,000 to pay the medical bill. So one of those times we couldn't scrape it together, and we used some of those some Roth IRA money. You mentioned how negative that is, and in hindsight, it would have been much better to have gone to the bank, taken out a line of credit or home equity or something, given what rates were at the time and everything. It would have been much better to have done that, left the money in that Roth IRA, but I had such an attitude of trying to avoid debt and not wanting any more debt that I didn't do that. And hindsight is 2020. It would have been, because of the compounding growth of that of a Roth, and not having to pay taxes on in the future, and all of these advantages that we've talked about, I now look back and realize that I would have been better off leaving that money to work over the long haul, and taking a loan at a reasonable rate and paying that loan back off over the next year or so, as quickly as possible, and that would have been a better plan. But we avoided some debt, so maybe it worked out.
Yeah.
Overall, that allowed us to then have more discretionary income to try to keep funding individual retirement accounts. So
Yeah. It's a hit or miss. I mean, you don't really know, but typically time is your best friend when it comes to Roth IRA. Or not typically, all the time. Having that money sitting there as long as possible to let it compound is the most ideal, right?
any retirement account,
Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah, any retirement account. Yeah.
Just give you a quick number. If you're running that $6,000 a year for 30 years, in 30 years that gives you $1 million. So we talk about becoming a millionaire. Easy peasy way is in any retirement account. Put in $500 a month for your 30 years of working, and you will be a millionaire when you retire. And if you're starting at 25, that means you're retiring. You've got $1 million at 55. So you might say, well, what about if we go to 65? That's 40 years. So a lot of us work for 40 years, and so what does that mean? That would mean you'd have $2.5 million, because that extra 10 years of growth, and that extra 10 years of contributing. And that's just at today's levels of contribution. So these, it wasn't but a few years ago that the max was $4,000, and I remember when it was even less than that, that you could put in every year into the individual retirement accounts. So that level is going to go up with inflation, and you're going to need more money in your retirement account with inflation too, right? So you just keep trying to match what the government provides you as a limit. Those limits are set, I think, with some rationale and some reason to them. And so if you're just trying to max that out over those years, then you're going to have, the point is that, like you were saying, with that time value of money, you're going to have plenty if you are doing this one strategy. And then on top of that, if you're working somewhere with a 401k, take the match. If you're at minimum, if you work somewhere that still has a pension or something like that, then you'll have that, and then you'll have some kind of Social Security. And so, you're going to put yourself in very good condition. And so take care of yourself so you can have a good, long, healthy health span. Because if you're doing these right moves, you're going to love it. Yeah.
It's funny. So the reason I really wanted to kind of dig into that was that we did have somebody commenting on our videos, and I was very appreciative that they're engaging. But they were saying how they use their Roth IRA as their emergency fund account. And so I really did want to dig into the reason why it's not suggested, and you do want to have a separate account. One, you want it to be an account that's very liquid, so, just like a savings account that you can pull quickly. And if you have investments tied up in your Roth IRA, then, that could take time. But also the longevity of that account and having that money in there as long as you can without trying to pull it out in case of an emergency, it's very beneficial. So can't remember your name, but whoever was engaging, that's really the reason why you don't want it to be your emergency fund in your Roth IRA.
Not if you can help it. I mean, at the end of the day, at the end of the day, there are going to be emergencies big enough and situations that are bad enough to where that may be the only option. And I mean, heck, people borrow from their 401ks. People take money even from a traditional IRA and pay the penalty because life can throw tomatoes at you sometimes and bust you in the face. But it's just absolutely last resort.
Ideally,
And so, the Roth principle is a little bit less of an absolute last resort than the traditional IRA, because on that traditional, you're going to pay the taxes on that money you take out and the 10% penalty. So it's really bad on the traditional. So that's why you might compare the two and say, the Roth can make a decent emergency fund. But if you can swing it financially, you definitely want to set up a real emergency fund so you can avoid that, because you're giving up. And I guess that's the point for that commenter is that yes, but if you do use it, you're giving up something important for the future.
Yep, absolutely. So last kind of question here that I've got, so you're more than welcome to add to this, but how do you get started with a Roth IRA? How do you set one up? What's the first step for someone who doesn't have one? Maybe they do have a 401k through work set up, but they don't have a Roth IRA and they're not sure how. What's the first steps there?
Well, the low-cost way to do it and the way that gives you lots of flexibility is to go to Vanguard, Fidelity, Schwab. I think you and I have kind of landed on Fidelity because of its platform and the many options that you have there. Vanguard's great if you want a little bit more of a hand-holding and less access to things that are not the right products. And so they're very low cost. In fact, they're pretty much free. You just pay the cost of the underlying investments. If you buy an ETF like a Vanguard Total World, you're going to pay less than 0.1, less than 0.1% in management fees. And so super low cost, and you can get set up there in a very diversified ETF and just put all your money into it and watch it grow over the years. And so go into Vanguard.com, Fidelity.com, one of these good places to open an account, and you just select open new account, tell it what type, and next thing you know, you'll have an automatic contribution set up for every week or month or whatever time period you want to go with. And you'll be funding that individual retirement account. And yes, you can do this even if you do already have a retirement account, such as a pension or an IRA or a 401k.
Yep. Well, awesome.
You just have to know about those limits for the Roth.
Right. Yeah. No, absolutely. Well, that's all I've got. Do you have anything else to kind of add about Roth IRAs or anything we may have missed?
Yeah, which one's best for who, the traditional versus the Roth, since we're kind of comparing them. If you expect and know, which you can't know, right, because like we talked about, you don't know what tax brackets will look like in the future. But if for some reason you expect to be in a lower bracket in retirement, because maybe you're getting close to retirement and you figure the status quo is going to be somewhat like the future, then maybe you want to use traditional IRAs and take that. If you're in a much higher bracket now, take that tax break now. If you expect to be in a higher tax bracket, then you want to choose the Roth. And since we don't know, then a good approach, like I mentioned, would be the middle ground, where you can split your contributions and hedge your bets on future tax rates and do a little bit of both. And because Roths weren't available when I first started, I've kind of landed in that boat where, now I'm splitting the contributions between the two, between the OG, which is more of the traditional that, I started with, and now some Roth. And so that's not a bad plan. So that's, what I recommend you do next is check your income, see if you qualify for the Roth, and then go out and set up that account and get started if you haven't already started.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that is a wrap for today's episode on Generational Sits. If you found this information useful, don't forget to subscribe, share it with someone interested in, how to invest for their retirement using maybe a Roth IRA, or, how to go about it with a traditional IRA. But if you do have questions or topic suggestions, please feel free to drop us a message or leave a comment. And we're excited to continue this series. So thank you.
All right. Enjoyed the night.
Enjoyed it.